Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here, Navah and Aviva. We're here to talk about choice and music lessons, basically, in children. And this is all, but if anyone wants to donate anything that we get, we'll just split between all the three of us. It's not going to be much. It's going to be like a free lunch at most. But I'll put up a little link later on where you can do that. I thought maybe we'd just start with introductions. So Nava, if you could go first, just tell us how music has looked in your life and what your life looks like these days. Anything that you feel like you want to share?
Okay. So I'm Nava Perlman, and I am a pianist and grew up playing piano from the age of 6. Studied here in New York City my whole life, and started performing as a teenager, and concertized pretty much up until the pandemic, with little breaks for different reasons, children, one thing or another. And currently actually had a bit of a COVID, what I would call a COVID career pivot. And I opened my own little home bakery, which I really did to kind of keep myself busy during the pandemic, not thinking that it would really take on much more of my time than just sort of like hobby hours. But it's actually just become a full-time job at this point. So it's sort of a bit of a curveball, but a happy one. So yeah.
I didn't realize you were doing that out of your home. So you have a whole business out of your home kitchen?
Yeah, it's not ideal, but it's where I am with it right now.
Wow, that's amazing. So, do you mind if I share your Instagram?
Oh no, you can feel
Okay, so
free.
Nava's on Instagram at Frosted by Nava, which is a play on Frost, which is her married
Yes,
name.
my married name.
And when I
Yes.
saw that, even the Instagram handle, I was like, that's so cute. And I was scrolling through it. They're brilliant. They're so beautiful. And then
Thank you.
did you do that just during the pandemic? Did you learn all that?
No, so no, it's deceiving. It looks like, oh wow, how did you learn how to do that in such a short time? No, I had been like a very, very enthusiastic hobby baker for a very long time. And even the cake decorating, which is now a huge part of why people purchase from me, I think. I mean, it tastes good. I hope it tastes good. I've done enough testing to think it does, but a lot of it, I think the draw is really visual because it's a very visual product. And that part of it, I actually started in my 30s, kind of toying with making the cakes look a little nicer by learning a few little piping, like a couple roses here and there. And then during the pandemic, I actually did a bunch of online. I sort of wanted to just take it farther. So I've done for the last couple of years on and off like little online mini courses, tutorials, some of them free from YouTube, some of them paid. And I have like a bunch of what I call like from a distance mentors, coaches, teachers who
Nice.
don't even realize. Sometimes I'll post something and I'll just tag them and say thank you because they don't even know me. But I feel like I learned a lot from these people.
That's
And
so
it's
cool.
always nice to shout out and appreciate and publicly. But yeah, so it wasn't like, a quick, a quick turnaround. It was really sort of a gradual path that then sort of accelerated when I had all this time. I mean, Aviva can tell you when the shutdown first happened, I was all about jigsaw puzzles. I did this huge, enormous jigsaw puzzle every day. I just sit there for hours, and then finally, I was like, "Wait a minute, no, this isn't gonna sustain me."
Right, right, exactly. Nava, Aviva, what was your pandemic obsession? Did you have some? Or were you too busy with
Um,
school?
well, I have to think about it. I am not a puzzle suited person. I have like some sort of learning disability where I'm like really spatially challenged. Like I can't read a map or do a puzzle, so definitely not that. Um, I I mean, I don't like to bake very much because I don't like following instructions, but I do like to cook. So I did that a lot during the pandemic. Also, I will say, my mom's not, I mean, yes, it was a gradual thing, and her cakes have always been beautiful, but the improvement has been exponential in the past couple years.
Let me
She did
just do a
make
little screen
my,
share so that people, if they're watching, can really understand. Because I didn't, you told me, Aviva, but I didn't understand the extent to which, like, these are like super intricate. These aren't just your average cake flowers. These are like flowers. They're like,
um, but she did make a completely like covered cake in flowers for my former babysitter's wedding in like 2015, and it was really beautiful at the time. Still would eat it now, but I think like, mom, I think you would be like, that is not even me who made that
No, I
now.
mean, it's funny because Aviva points out that was definitely a bit of a watershed moment. We're very close with this woman. She was with us from when Aviva was very, very little. And when she got married, she didn't have family here. And I was like, I want to do something special. And when I look at pictures of that wedding cake, I think, ooh, ooh. But I
it's a
think
lot
at
like
least
music,
it
actually,
tasted
isn't
good. It
it?
was,
It's a lot like when we perform and then
yes,
there's a recording. You're like, I can't believe that that's out there, but it's out there, and there are pictures and there are recordings and
yeah,
I mean, if you don't
exactly.
regret it, you're not making progress. But I think, I mean, it was delicious and she really liked it. So anyway,
Yeah.
but
yeah. So, okay, Aviva, your turn. Why don't you tell us a little about your music path and where you are nowadays?
sure. Well, my mother is a pianist, just not a practicing one, which is equally good. And my dad is extremely tone deaf. Um, and um, so I think I played piano first from like 6 to 9, probably. My mom's best friend, Carmel, was my teacher. And I really liked it, but mostly because I liked Carmel. Um, and then I had like really wanted to play cello for a really long time. And I kept asking, and I think it just sounded like I didn't really know what I was talking about. But then I said that I wanted to play what Zool played, and so my mom was like, "Oh, she does know what she's talking about. That is the right instrument."
Wait, how old were you at
Um,
this time?
I started playing when I was 9,
Okay.
so I would say a couple years before. I
So you
I
had
was
basically
like
seen her
really
perform
interested
with
in it.
Zool and you were like that. Do you remember hearing
Yeah,
him perform?
no, I don't really remember. I remember my first lesson, um, but I don't really remember like wanting to play so much. And it's actually like all of the adults in my life who were there for the first couple years thought I hated it, so I probably did. I don't remember that though all that much.
Right.
Funny, I don't
And
remember your hating it. I remember you wanting to go to your lessons.
oh, okay. Well, then maybe that was later on in like middle school.
I think that was later because in the beginning, I don't know if you remember, but Amy made it so much fun for you
Yeah,
that
I
like,
did.
I mean, I found it fun and I wasn't even the kid. She's just an incredible person and
She
a
really
really great
is.
teacher. And I thought, wow, if I, if people had teachers like that for everything, they'd all want to be in school all the time and learning things because of
Yeah.
that special spark.
No, I did really love her, still do. But yeah, so I definitely I remember wanting to go in the beginning, and then kind of went through a rough patch in middle school, and I my parents always made it very clear to me that I could quit at any time. Um, and for some reason, I didn't want to. I don't know if I mean, I've never felt actual pressure from my family to keep going, but I don't know if I like felt pressure that wasn't actually there, or if I like what was motivating me, because I really don't remember enjoying that much. And then I found chamber music and my life changed forever.
That's how it is for most of
um
us, right? Oh.
yeah. I had gone to Suzuki Institutes, which were very fun, and I had gone to Interlaken for a couple years, which I really liked, but I wasn't playing chamber music there. I was just in orchestra and had private lessons and practiced. And also that was from when I was like 9 or 10 to 13, so it wasn't I wasn't like sounding super great, and there wasn't like that positive reinforcement of my own playing to keep me motivated. But then in 2013, I went to Greenwood for the first time, which is a chamber music camp, and like my life changed. I was like, this is what I want to do forever. Um, and yeah, kind of got the bug. And since then, I mean, now I still do want to play chamber music, but I think I'm much more open to seeing what interests me. I kind of tread the line between what feel I've been conditioned to want and what I do want, and I'm trying to figure out what that is. I do love chamber music truly and independently of, you know, anything that is telling me to want that, um, or to want cello. But I also am very conscious that um, of course, I should want it because I've been working for it, and we want things that we work hard for. So yeah, so that is something that I'm also thinking about at the same time.
Nava, do you remember that moment when she went to this camp and then came back on fire? Was that how did that look from your perspective?
Well, I will preface my answer by saying that specifically Greenwood Music Camp had been in my sort of orbit since I was a little kid because one of my really good friends who I went to school with went there, and I would hear about it from her. And she was really one of my closest friends growing up. She was not anyone who ever wanted to necessarily become a musician, but this is like the place that was magic for her when we were little. So when Aviva came back and sort of had been hypnotized by this place in a good way, it was not surprising to me at all. And I was so extremely happy for her because we all want, happy experiences for our kids, whatever form they should take. And what I didn't know, but now in hindsight, I probably could have predicted, is not just sort of what an impact it had on her musically and her love of chamber music, sort of cultivating that and really allowing that to flourish, but just the friendships. I mean, she has this group of friends that are the most spectacular people, and they have this bond, I think, not just because they really love each other as humans, but because they have this common experience that they have shared through camp. And it's, honestly, like I kind of just like, if anything came out of it that I could say was sort of a game changer for humans, not just like apart from music, it's these bonds and these friendships, which I think are so special. And to this day, I'm just like, I'm happy that she was able to find these people.
That's so
I
great.
actually the first group I ever played with at Greenwood was Haydn Gypsy Trio Last Movement, and there's a video out there. Someone's parent has it. I don't know who. Um, and we now go to college together, and we're living together next year.
Wait, you're all
Me and the
together?
violinist, just me and the violinist. The pianist
That's
was a little younger,
amazing. That's so fun.
but we've known each other for for 8 plus years, 9 years, I think. Although I could be wrong about that. And this year they were like, "When did we become friends?" And I was like, "Last year? I don't know." But we've known each other for so long, and now we go to school together, and it's just been like such a nice extension of camp and of chamber music love. Um, yeah, it's been
That's so
great.
cool. I have to admit, Nava, what really drew me to this conversation was when Aviva was doing training with me, and I didn't know what kind of pianist you were. Like, I actually didn't know if you were like the kind of pianist that performed like at church and just like hung out with people and then she said, well, my mother went from performing and then, pivoted to this other, like, baking and things like that. And I thought, well, I wonder what draws someone to make that decision. Because I had been battling myself from a teacher perspective of, am I forcing this on my students? Like, so one of the questions in this station that looking to answer for myself was all my students, like I'm a really fun teacher. I think Amy and I kind of function on similar levels in that way. And that, not that I'm comparing myself to Amy because she's just so incredible. She's like, I do stuff she does. Like all the fun stuff I steal from her are like 100% hits. But all my students stop practicing when they get to puberty, basically. So once they start that, there's like the independence thing, which is like 8 or 9 years old. And I feel like students deal with an independence pull from their parents at that stage. And then I'm there to support both sides. And then even my very serious students, I do a lot of extrinsic motivation, actually, which I've taken out of my teaching lately. But they just literally would go from practicing every day to zero for years. And then it's like a trend in my studio. I've been teaching long enough to know this. Then in high school, they pick it back up and they're amazing because they've had this great groundwork that's really broad from the way that I teach. And I think my instinct through this pandemic, because I've had a lot of time to think about it, is that forcing like a lot of what Aviva has said, like I'm conditioning my students to want something. And then when they get to middle school, they're like, oh no, I don't want that. I want to explore that and do all these other things. And then most of them come back to it, whether or not it's because they like our relationship or they like music or they're connected to the cello in some way or they like performing, whatever it is, they find their muse and then they go forward. A lot like what Aviva was saying. But when I heard your story, Nava, I was like, well, this is someone who actually, and then I learned later that you had, from Shannon, when Shannon connected with Aviva, I was like, oh, she's like a performer. Like and we call Zool, we don't call him Zool, we call him the guy with the hair. I'm like, she performs with the guy with the hair. And my students are going to be really happy that I met someone that knows the guy with the hair. So I was like, well, you had a real career. And then I wonder for you, like, knowing this context from which I'm coming in and I wonder where along the line do you feel like your desire to be in music was your destiny because you decided for it to be, or was there some like undercurrent or low hum or high hum of this is just what I'm supposed to do because at an early age, I started.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what I've realized is that it's not necessarily that one exists without the other. It can be both. And I think that's the confusing part. Like the truth is I truly am a lover of music. I'm a lover of the piano. I always will be. And I think that for a while, it may have been like, this is what I know how to do. But I remember feeling at times when at different times in my career, feeling consciously, gosh, I love what I do. I love playing. I love performing. I am I feel very fortunate. I'm a lucky person that I get to do this for my job. And then I don't know that I didn't really stop loving music or stop loving the piano, but I did start sort of, I think, pulling back from the lifestyle, which is difficult. It's hard to travel. It's hard to be away from home. It's hard to be away from your kids. Aviva is the oldest of four. We have a big family and I am I want to be a very present mother and I don't take parenting lightly. It's to me extremely important. And I think that for a while, I may have, had I known that there was this other thing that could be keeping me busy, I may have stopped playing sooner. I don't think I realized that it was an option. And I think that, the truth is that you have to understand, in order to kind of answer these questions, I think part of it is you have to know yourself a bit and sort of what is making you tick. I've never been motivated by the kind of ambition that you sort of sometimes associate with performers, like in terms of ego, for example. Like I don't really need to be the center of attention in order to feel happy in my life. And I know that can be a component for some people. Some people really thrive off of that. And it's part of their part of their personality. That never was the driving force. I never felt driven by desperation for, I want to say applause, like I don't need applause. It's not really like a motivator for me. I was always driven really by repertoire. So if somebody said to me, do you want to play X piece next year in March? Because we have somebody who wants that. If it was something that appealed to me, that really was the draw. It wasn't necessarily going to the place or trying to think of, oh, wow, well, that means I get to wear that dress that I just bought, or that means I get to go to a city I've never been to. No, it was never about that. It was always like, oh, that's an excuse to learn this piece that I've always wanted to learn. Or, I learned that piece a long time ago, but no one ever asked me to perform it. And it would be great to do that. Like, it would feel like kind of fun to dig into that. It was almost exclusively a repertoire driven, like, for me, that's what it has been about.
Right.
And I think, for some people, that's not necessarily the entire picture. It can be motivation from so many different things. I mean, talk about people who, are under incredible financial pressures, that they're motivated because, well, this is really the only way they can make money, and they have to make a, rent every month and so forth. And I'm not married to a musician, which is, a very different sort of, it provides a different framework in terms of that type of thing, because freelancing and being a musician or any kind of artist is a different picture in terms of economics. But so I'm trying to just unwind what I just said in terms of answering your question. I think that, there was definitely an element of, well, this is what I know how to do. There was definitely an element of, I love this. I adore this. This is like, how this is what makes the world a better place. Not me specifically playing music, but music in general, and which I still believe. But I believe that's true of most art forms, whether it's visual art, dramatic arts, dance, whatever. Like, we need those things that bring us out of our mundane existence into a place of, a place where we can be soul searching and appreciating beauty. That's like to me, that extremely important part of existing. I know not everybody would necessarily feel that way, but that's kind of that's how I'm wired.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Aviva, do you have any thoughts come up as you listen to her?
Yeah, I think also, I don't know. I'm also, I mean, this conversation is really timely for me. Back to Greenwood, everything always is for me. Um, One of the violin teachers there, Becca Fisher, she she recently wrote a book. It's called The Sound of Memory, and she comes from a family of working musicians as well. And the first essay is called The Family Business, and I mean, I felt like she was speaking right to me. And I've talked about it with her. I was really nervous going to college for music. You know, a lot of, I think, what has motivated me, I don't know, motivation is a really interesting topic. And so, where I've landed right now is that it doesn't matter really what motivates me as long as I'm happy in the moment. Like, I used to be really, like, my fuel was resentment and, like, pressure. And that I really thrived under that. Not resentment really, but, like, resentment for, if I made a mistake in the past, like, nailing it the next time. And so I guess, I don't know if that's resentment's the right word, but whether that fuel is healthy or not, I'm not super focused on that at the moment, because I'm still moved. Like, I still have moments where I'm like, this is magical. But, like, I remember asking my dad when I was younger whether he loved his job. And he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, are you excited to go to work every day? And he was like, well, like, I like that I get to spend time with you guys and that I don't need to travel. And I was so confused. I was like, I don't understand how that's a fulfilling life. Now I do. I get it. I understand that, he has hobbies and passions outside of work. And that's how, I mean, that's honestly, like, much more efficient and I think healthy for a lot of people to be able to love what they do outside of work and like work or not like work. And then, it's not complicated when other forces get involved. But I one thing that I questioned a lot as a kid was, if I really didn't like it, I think I'd know. Like, there are so many people who quit, so there must be a reason that they do that and I'm not.
That's
And,
interesting.
if I get to college, or if I get to auditioning and I still am like wanting to do it, then like, what is the threshold? I'm sure I'll know when I hit the threshold. And like, of course, you don't know when you hit the threshold really most of the time. Um, but I think there is something. It's almost like the way people describe addiction. I know that's probably not a. I mean, it's not a fair comparison to make that as a disease, but the like, the what is it called? The irregular, like, or inconsistent reward, where like most of the time you're not getting a reward, but then sometimes you get magic, and that's what keeps you staying. Like, I saw a recital last week and I cried, and I cried because they played Slow Movement of Debussy Quartet, which I love, but I usually don't cry at it all that much. But they looked like they were having such a good time, and I was like, that magic exists for them, which means that even though I haven't felt it in a couple years, it'll exist for me too if I keep waiting. Which, that is kind of unhealthy on its own. That, like, I shouldn't keep grinding because I'm waiting for this potential thing to happen that may not ever happen again. But I keep doing it because I know that it could be there. Um, and so I mean, this is kind of unrelated and talking more about motivation, but I do think that there is, I think, for my mom, I'm not playing to make money right now, and I'm playing to learn. And there's so every pressure that will be on me later if I choose to pursue this is not on me right now. So all of my motivation is basically intrinsic. I mean, I have a lesson every week and I want to make my teacher happy, but ultimately it's up to me. Whereas I think with my mom, with any adult who's playing, it's like, if the things surrounding the magic don't fulfill you anymore, but you can still access the magic just by listening or by teaching or by doing something else, then it kind of makes more sense to do that. Um, and I feel like I've seen a renewed liveliness, a renewed life, and renewed joy in my mom doing, baking. I've never seen her more interested in anything. And I remember moments where you were so happy to be playing certain rep, but this is consistent and it feels healthier. And if that's an option, for people, then I'm like, why not take it?
Well, I think also it's really hard to, it's sort of hard to know. It's kind of a strange thing, actually. It's like most people, they decide what they want to do when they're in college or in grad school. And those are the moments when your interests sort of come to fruition and you're like, oh, well, what do I really want to do? And you're an older person at that point. You're in your late teens, early 20s, or maybe even late 20s. And oh yes, I realize that I need to go back to school to do the science that I need because I'm going to take the MCATs and go to med school. Well, for artists who have actually been doing what they do since they're children, it's a very different path because you don't have the advantage of coming to it fresh as an adult and saying, like, okay, on balance, how does this work for me? I love this thing, but these are all the things about it that are difficult. And let's see, on balance, does it do these things get outweighed by this, and you don't have that objectivity because you've been living with it since your brain is like mush, when you're a child. So you actually have a disadvantage. You get to a point where, and there's the disadvantage that you can't really start training when you're in your late teens, early 20s, if you want to do it, because like sports or ballet or anything physical, your muscle memory needs to start kicking in very, very early. So in a sense, it's like there's this lack of clarity because you're coming to it having all of the trajectory of childhood and adolescence kind of going with you into adulthood. And one thing it's so funny, Aviva is probably tired of hearing me say this, but like, Aviva, when she said before that she cooked during a pandemic, I'm just going to tell you, and she can blush all she wants. Aviva is amazing in the kitchen. She's a fabulous cook. She's extremely talented. I'm really not kidding. Like she could, to me, and lately I've been saying every time she comes home, she'll make food and I'll be like, you could go to culinary school and just be a rock star because this is insane. This food is insane. And I actually mean it because I sort of feel like, we're talking about choice and we're talking about it's really a difficult thing to think of. And it makes me happy to hear Aviva say that she's still sort of open and thinking about lots of things, because I do feel like it's important to give yourself every option in terms of, how you want to educate yourself, how you want to proceed in life. There's a very, very real fear, I think, with a lot of people who are musicians, like who grew up doing it, like, wait, what if I don't end up wanting to do this after all?
Well,
And it's a hard thing to look at.
can I piggyback off of that? I very much like I used to be very much against starting kids out playing music or playing classical music when they're like 3. And I don't agree necessarily. I think there's so much more complexity that that topic deserves than what I was giving it. But I do think that I remember being told by my grandparents that the golden years are now. So if I want to have an option to do this as an adult for money later, I had to put in the work now, which to a certain extent is true, but it's not, that's not set in stone. But I I do think it's an unfair thing to say to a kid because the options that they're weighing against, and let's say in terms of careers, for example, those careers they haven't put in the 18 years to get there. So there's less investment. And it feels like if you stop playing then it's kind of not worth it, which I so disagree with. I think every experience I have, even if I end up not playing professionally or quitting completely, was 100% worth it. But it still is like, there's definitely a financial, investment in my music training. There's, all of these things. There's an emotional investment. If I sit at the cello for 4 hours every day, that's a long time to then not do anything with, or at least not do anything with. Whatever. But I also think most people who I know don't end up becoming professional musicians and they still play and they're so happy about it and they knew that that's what was going to happen. And I don't know if it was because I'm a kid of a musician or if it was something else, but I do think, to what I was saying before, if I didn't want it, I wouldn't do it. And because I know so many people who don't do it and they're so happy. Like they play chamber music for fun or they learn concertos for fun and they know that they're not pursuing it professionally. And it was always like that. And I don't know if it's because I didn't think there was another option, although I do think there was. I know that my dad's not a musician. So, I knew that there were other careers, but there was something about, I felt like it was like a destiny, which I don't think is healthy. Like, I just felt like there was nothing else that I was trained for, so there's nothing else I could be good at. And the cooking, I am trying to, like, invest myself academically in school. Like, I'm trying to widen my net just so that I feel like my worth isn't in the cello, that, like I'm a full human who plays the cello and I don't go insane. Um, and I think that has been better for my playing and also just like for my viewing myself. But I think it's so hard when you start young, and I don't even start that young compared to so many people.
No, but it's the same. But I don't even think, I think that's splitting hairs. I think the point is that, like a normal life, for your average person who isn't in a field that, you start very, very young, they're coming at it in such a different way. It's really a different context. And I do think it gets very complicated.
Yeah.
Aviva, I'm going to circle back to something you said before that just caught me. And you said, what have I been conditioned to want and what do I actually want? So is this something that you feel like you deal with these days? Because you're at this point in your life, you're at the end of school, you're undergrad, and you're ready to like you're at a pivotal point in your life too. So is this something that you feel like needs answering, or do you feel like you've come to terms with whatever's been happening in your head about that?
I've been thinking about it a lot. Um I don't think this is TMI, but I don't know if other people will. I have pretty intense anxiety, and I don't have OCD, but a lot of my anxiety manifests in obsessions and compulsions. And one of those things is I love to ruminate. Oh boy, and I'm good at it. And I think a lot of the questions that I had about cello as a kid was, I think it was anxiety and, rumination disguised as like legit questions. And I am trying to parse out now what, it's like, obviously, I mean, maybe not all people. I want to know things. I want to know certainties. And I want to feel autonomy. That's a big thing in my anxiety, is feeling like I'm making choices for myself. And, like even when I was little, a lot of my habits were like re-enunciating my words to make sure that I did it on purpose. Or, like making sure that I saw things, like, turning my head to see to make sure that I saw what I did see. There was a lot of like making sure that things were certain and making sure that I chose to make those actions. And I've been thinking a lot about whether, the way I viewed cello is through that lens. Um, I, I really don't like performing. It's very, I don't have so much performance anxiety. It's more like I don't, I don't like being looked at. Like it's just all of the things that are in performance I happen to not enjoy. Um, and I, why did I bring that up? I don't remember. But I do think I think it's unfair, not unfair, I think it's inaccurate to use the word conditioning, because nothing exists in a vacuum, especially, you know, raising kids. Everyone is impacted by everything. And whether, in a negative, neutral, or positive way. Um, but it's whether I actually enjoy it now. Like when I was younger, I was obsessed with the idea that genetically I was made to do this. But I'm one of four and my three siblings don't do it. So, it's, and I wasn't thinking super complexly genetically that like maybe it was me and not my sister. That still is a rabbit hole I could go down, but it's not a productive one, because it doesn't matter whether I was made to do it or not. It matters whether I enjoy it now. And I have the same autonomy as everyone else. It's just I'm aware of it because I can trace back what I think has impacted me pretty easily. Um, I think if I was adopted, I probably two different parents who weren't musicians, I don't think I'd think about it. Like it's more that I can see it, and I see how those lives have played out. And I I think I'm much more similar to my mom's baking life now than I ever was to her musical life then. I don't think I don't want, and I don't think it's in the cards for me, the trajectory that my grandparents have had. Um, it's a very, I think it's only because that there's proof of it that I'm obsessed about it. But I think obviously also some kids are trained to want success, and that success is defined very explicitly as musical excellence or as, academic excellence, and they can fulfill that. And I think that is conditioning. Um, but it's not conditioning music, it's conditioning love and mattering and praise. Um, and I don't think that that was ever conditioned into me, which is why I don't think that when my thinking about conditioning as a younger person, I don't think that that was actually productive. I don't think that made any sense, but it made sense in my head. Um, just meaning that like I don't think the music stuff was actually conditioned into me, and the praise stuff for sure was not. Like I was praised equally for not playing music as I was for, and my siblings definitely they played music but quit, and that was never a problem. So I also knew that that was a possibility for me too. Um, but I think the problems come when you're conditioning other things and attaching it to music. And so I think, wait, hold on, to make this clearer, I think I'm getting over it now. I think I am, but it is interesting to think about and to kind of obsess over, because I don't think other people, like my roommate is so passionate about so many things, and I don't think she ever thinks that like her genetics were made. I mean, where her genetics have led her to this specific point in her life. Like I don't think that people are obsessing about it the way.
I wonder, like, if you both
Yeah.
can talk to either Nava in your youth or also Aviva, since you went through this middle school period that it seems like all my middle school students go through of, hating practicing, like to a core. I love the cello. I love playing the cello. I hate practicing. I hate when you mention practice or, I hate if anyone, so all these things that like, I wonder if there's something in there that like, what made you turn the corner or what do you feel like was the core of that dislike? Or is it just that as middle schoolers, we need to explore so many things that there's just not enough time to dedicate the time that we want to this craft that we, all of us agree, if you do it early, it makes it so much easier, right?
Yeah, I think also, sorry, I just realized that I rambled for so long and it didn't make sense. So apologies.
No, it
But
made sense.
it, thank you. In terms of like what I didn't like about it, I didn't like that I sounded bad. I wanted to sound really good and I wanted to play rep that wasn't accessible to me then. Um, and then it turned the corner when I was able to play that rep. Um,
I think
and
that's actually very common too. I think what happens is that, I mean, certainly, I think there's a bit of sort of like you feel like it can go either way. You get really motivated because you're like, oh, if I can't play that piece, I'm not going to be able to be happy. And that can be motivating, but I also think it'd be frustrating. And I think there are certain people who are like, well, I'll never be able to do that, so I'm just going to not do it.
yeah,
And then later they miss it. I went through middle school, like high school. I never liked practicing, never, even in adulthood. Hate practicing. But it's interesting. I think that like the relationship that we all have with music can be likened to a relationship that you have with a person. Nobody, and I have made this analogy with jobs too and careers, like, and actually that's maybe a better more on the nose way to put it. So there's no perfect job, right? Like you ask someone who's passionate about their job, let's just say it's, I don't know, a cardiac surgeon. What do you love about your job? I love saving people's lives. What do you hate about your job? Well, there's a lot of admin work and I can't stand doing it, but I'm the only one that can because I'm the only one that was in the operating room that can document this. Whatever, I'm the only one that deals with the insurance because I have my own practice and I have to deal with this. But I love my patients. I love being able to help people, right? Okay, so that's like a mundane example, but and same thing can be true with friends too, like with friendships. Like, you have this kooky friend, you love everything about her, but you can't stand, you have these pet peeves and she like pushes your buttons in all the wrong ways, but you stay friends with her. Why? Because on balance, this is a person you love. So you will take the good with the bad because you love this person and this is an important friendship for you. Similarly, I think we have these relationships. The same relationship can be said about music. Like, well, we love listening, we love playing or playing by ourselves, maybe not in public, but there are these things about it I don't like. I don't like practicing. In Aviva's case, I don't like the nervousness that I feel under certain circumstances. I have tremendous anxiety and it really irritates me and makes it unpleasant. But I can't quit because I love the way this sounds when I finally get to play XYZ. It's like, and it's a very weird thing, but like, this is something that can be applied to so many things about life. Like you always have your things about, about your career or what you do that are the downs, like what you'd say, well, this is the downside of it. And I think that when the downside starts to outweigh the other stuff, then you have to start looking at it and being like, well, is this right for me? And I think, and I also think it really depends on how you're wired. Like one of the things about Aviva that's always been true is that Aviva is just such a person of incredible curiosity of many, many things, not just one thing. And there are a lot of musicians who really can only talk about music. It's the only thing they're curious about. It's the only thing they love. And Aviva's not like that. Aviva's got a lot of, she's just got a big brain and a lot of, and she's inquisitive and loves learning about a lot of things and finds a lot of things in life interesting, which is, that's how she's wired. And that's why Aviva, I always say to myself, like, I could see you doing many things because you do have, you're an amazing musician, but you have a lot of really great brain power. And, if you woke up one day and said to yourself, actually, I don't want to do this anymore, I want to do this, it wouldn't surprise me or disappoint me. I would just be like, wow, that sounds good. Because I understand, having watched you for so long, and how you respond to things, your surroundings, people, things you read, things you watch, your experiences, like you're like a fully, you're a fully dimensional person.
Thank you, but also I think that's also why in middle school, I think why people stop practicing is that there are so many, like there is that level of autonomy that they didn't have, or at least that I didn't have before my school moved when in sixth grade, and I was going to school by myself. Like I felt really independent, and there were so many things that were so just as interesting as cello and didn't require the work. So I do think, and I think it's a combination of that, and that by the time you're playing that long, you're becoming discerning about your own playing. And it is disappointing to not sound good and to have goals and to not know when those goals will be met. But I do think, like, watching your lessons, Andrea, like, and watching people progress at different rates, that especially in your newer lessons where you're not actively praising and you're not stating facts and matching their language to, for their goals, it's so interesting to watch the intrinsic motivation, like, guide what they're curious about. Like, I remember one time you saying, what if a student doesn't care about intonation? Like, that's not a value they hold. And it never occurred to me. I was like, well, intonation, you have to be in tune in order to sound good. But some people don't. Sounding good is different.
Right.
And sounding good to me is intonation, but it could be vibrato to someone else, or, sound to some, it's so subjective, and we put these false objective values on classical music, and I think that can be really limiting for a kid, especially in something that they were told was going to be creative.
Right, like that's
when
exactly
you're in art
like
class and you're making all this stuff.
When I balance out my teaching with the way I taught 10 years ago, it's like I haven't taught this way long enough to know if it actually works with helping these kids stay motivated. Like if I say, listen, your intonation is not correct. Your fingers, if you keep doing this, they will hurt eventually. Or we could move on to another piece and ignore all this stuff. What would you like to do? It's like my job to make sure that they won't hurt themselves, right? But is it my job to make them care about it? So that's like in terms of teaching and parenting, especially with my daughter as a parent, but that's when I have trouble letting go. I'm like, yeah, well, you don't have to brush your teeth. But I'm going to be the one that pays for the cavities and the dentures and all that stuff. But also, your life is going to be really hard if you don't do this. Like, I need to make you value brushing your teeth, So it's like at some point, your brain is not fully formed either. Like, your brain isn't fully formed till you're 25 or 28 or so, So just, it's like, how much of that should I be pushing on my students and pushing on my daughter, because these are things you can't possibly know because you're just not an adult yet, but at the same time, that autonomy, we know with kids, autonomy leads to intrinsic motivation. So if I give you the choice, are you going to want it more? Are you going to make the right choice for your body or the right,
Right.
It's hard.
Right. I do
also,
think actually sorry, go ahead, Aviva.
I was just going to say that now the thing that I'm thinking about right now, particularly, is my taste. That I listened to exclusively, a couple musicians growing up. And so I like playing that sounds like that. And figuring out that my taste isn't exactly the same as my mom's has been very interesting to me, and kind of disappointing at first. And then being like, well, I'm my own person. And she grew up with a different set, similar set. The Venn diagram was almost the same circle, but still different circles. And I, it's just now I'm like, okay, well, like as an example, I was taught not by a cello teacher, just in life, that good playing is playing, good string playing is playing that has vibrato that's continuous, except for in Baroque music, which you don't need to vibrate. And in college, I think in general, there's like a really interesting path of when people experiment with different things. And, I think in college, a lot of people like experiment with swells, which can become kind of a problem later, but like,
I'm like,
it's just interesting that all of us do it. And, or like not vibrating immediately or not vibrating at all. And, I'm hearing Prokofiev Symphonia Concertante tonight, and the person in my studio who's playing it, hi Avery, the person in my studio who's playing it plays so beautifully, and I really like his playing, and he doesn't vibrate all the time, and thinking that like I was taught, not explicitly, that means that that's not good playing, but I still really enjoy it, and I still think that he's a fabulous cellist, and I'm excited to hear it tonight. And it's just like that level of autonomy, I think, is like a sub thing that I realized later on. But I think it can be frustrating. I said this earlier, but when you're told that something's creative and then you're given rules and you don't know how to work within the limitations that are given to you, some things like, I appreciate when someone tells me that I'm going to be in pain if I keep doing this later. But some things I'm like, don't tell me that that's a rule when that's just what you want to hear. And that was really frustrating to me as a kid. I was like, well, I know that that's not real or that's not objective, but I don't have the language to say why. And when I do, it just seems like I'm yelling at you, and I'm 9. Like there's that level of, it doesn't feel good, but you don't know why. And I don't know. I think it's so interesting what is worth, like everything is in cello is, you're saying that you can't teach them to care about something, but to a certain extent, a person can if you make it seem like fact. And what is worth it in the long run for them to figure out that it's not fact later, but at least they didn't get hurt, and what is, and what feels not worth it. That balance just doesn't feel
Well,
right.
I also think, just bringing this back to, there are a lot of comparisons you can make, as you mentioned, to parenting, where it's like you do want to, I have never really wanted to use certain kind of language. I mean, now they're all older, so I wouldn't, but like when my kids, especially when my kids were really little, like I always have viewed things like when someone says, well, if someone did ask, well, why do I have to brush my teeth? I don't really believe in the responses like, because I said so, like I'm not into that. That doesn't work. That's disrespecting your child, and it is not helpful in any way. And, or like the equivalent of that, just like, this is what we do, or this is the rules of this house. No, not, that doesn't work. It doesn't help. It doesn't work. It doesn't, to me, it's like just, that's kind of just throwaway words that are meaningless. And I remember having sort of a realization when my kids were very little that like I could really only parent by treating them with the kind of respect that would require my explaining things more sort of granularly than you might with a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, but that it was what worked for me. And I remember on 2 specific occasions, not with Aviva, but with one of my other kids, thinking to myself as I was talking to her, I don't even know if this is making an impact. I don't even know if she understands this, but this is the only way I can explain this. And it's maybe a little over her head, but somehow this is where I have to draw the line and just be like, all right, I'm going to do it this way because this is the only way I can do it. And I think that, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think perhaps part of the reason that middle schoolers decide they're not going to practice anymore and that they're going to quit their instrument is because they haven't been treated with the respect, and they've just been told what to do because I said so. And then they get to a point where they're sick of that answer and they're older and they can decide, well, I don't care that you said that. I'm saying this. No. And that is a kind of natural progression. And I think as much as I'd like to believe that there are plenty of parents who don't parent that way, I know better. There are plenty of parents who parent that way.
And teachers who
And
teach that way.
yeah. And and it's funny because I've looked around and seen, like, I'll hear that, for example, a friend of one of my kids is still taking piano lessons into high school and never quit, where one of my kids did. I think to myself, how do they get their kids to do something all the way through middle school when they don't want to do it? And I don't know what they're doing. I don't know whether they're saying, because I said you have to do this, or I'll hear one of my kids say, well, in that family, you have to take an instrument through high school. That's the rule. Well, I don't know how that, I don't know how I could parent that way and feel okay about it. When it
But you're
comes to
also
things,
coming from, I mean, that is a specific.
that's very specific, but even like maybe a better example would be like, I don't know what a better example would be, but my point is, I am a person who, if a child of mine, when they're very little, asks me, well, why do I have to do this? A good example is the brushing teeth, actually. It is a good example because, or maybe it's not a good example because that's a health thing, because you can really explain to a child the dangers of not taking care of your body. Like, that's
But
actually,
it still is a value that you're assigning to it. Like the kid could be like, well, I don't want to.
right, but you can point to actual bodily harm
That's true.
when, so maybe that it's not an example, but a good example would be something like, you have to decide for yourself how you feel by comparison walking into a room that's neat and organized, where you can find your things, and whether you're productive in that environment, whether you're just as productive in an environment where you can't find anything and where everything's all over the place. Because I'm also not a believer in forcing my kids to clean their rooms. I've never been a believer in that. If your room is your own space, you live in it the way you'd like to, with the exception of, I don't want like black mold growing in there, but because that again is a health issue and dangerous. But my, I would never force, I just don't believe in going to someone's private space and telling them how they should live. But I don't mind having the conversation of, this may be an option for you that isn't working for you. Like, maybe what would work better for you is your desk actually being cleared off. And then if my child says, well, I don't work on my desk, I work on my bed. My bed is cleared off. Okay, good. Go you. But you know what I mean? Like, I need to have that conversation so that I understand, okay, my value of walking into my room where the bed is made isn't necessarily the same for my child. Like, a really good example is actually my husband, because he doesn't care if the bed is made. He doesn't see things like that. Like, that doesn't enter into his functionality. It does into mine, which is why I don't ever mind making the bed. It's important to me.
Right.
It's not important to him. And it's like, these are the same kinds of conversations that I feel like a lot of parents don't give their kids credit when they're very, very little, to have those kinds of conversations. And then by the time they hit adolescence, it's like full-blown rebellion, and it permeates everything, whether it's practicing their instrument or keeping their room neat or making certain choices with what they wear or whatever. Like, pick your category.
Yeah, absolutely. That's helpful for me to hear in that context, actually, because I think that what I was doing in my teaching is, through Aviva knows all this, with all my extrinsic motivators, was getting them to do my bidding, basically, but making it fun, so that when they realize this isn't, I haven't ever had to think about what it is that I wanted out of the cello. I was just following it because it was fun, and I'm a kid and I like fun. But then when it came down to true meaning behind the practicing, that it really wasn't there. I want to be mindful of your time, but maybe just another like 5 or 10 minutes. But maybe Martha and Shannon, if you want to come on and share your thoughts or ask Navah or Viva some questions, you're welcome to come on. Or if Navah, Viva, you have other thoughts that you want to share.
Hi.
Hey.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
God, I so wish we all were sitting around a table drinking coffee or something. And I've been talking back to you all the time. I've been joining in the conversation. I mean, not out loud, but in my own head. I mean, so many things that you're talking about, both of you, all three of you, just resonate with me. Your ideas about, bringing kids up. I've got two kids who are grown up now, but allowing them autonomy and how that carries over into everything. My kids are not musicians. They both were given the opportunity, but they also had the choice. My daughter was a very talented pianist. Oh my God, she was so good. It didn't, it wasn't meaningful to her. And now she's doing something else. And I am so pleased that she found her own path that's meaningful. I think that I'm not at all surprised that both of you are so good at other things, especially things that require attention to detail, because that's one of the big things that music teaches us, attention to detail and self-motivation and dedication and work ethic. And when I have parents of those famous middle schoolers who are going, oh my God, we're investing all this money in lessons. What for? And I'm like, no, they're learning so much. They're learning so much, and it doesn't matter if they're going to be musicians or not. It really doesn't matter. They're going to apply this to whatever they do. And Aviva, you are so articulate and well thought out. And Navah, you have my permission to just be wildly proud of her. Oh my gosh.
Thank
This
you.
has been really, really enjoyable. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Martha.
I was going to say the same thing. I've got a son just a couple years younger than you, Aviva, and I love you. Navah, seriously, you should be so proud. You have raised a quality person here. You really have.
There are three more.
I have two other sons, and one of them right now is begging. Well, my oldest, he's crammed in right now with AP tests and getting ready to start college applications. So he was really stressed. So I let him stop piano for a little while. And then he's really excited to get back into it in the summer, but he was just so stressed. But my kid, who's actually on the autism spectrum, he is begging me to quit right now. Like this is such a timely thing for me to see, to have these three other mothers and then a student here, and to see this relationship, because I'm really struggling with saying, okay, you can quit, because it's not that he's so talented, it's that he is, but he mentally gets so much out of the ability now to play. So all these years that we've been dealing with trying to get him to practice and stuff, he's able to utilize all of that now for an actual psychological and mental health benefit that he wouldn't have been able to in the past. And so
Shannon, do you tell him that?
We talk about it. He's like, why? And then I tell him, but he's still so young, he's 14. He has not, he doesn't trust that I know what I'm talking about, which is, and it's okay. I've been through this before. So, but it is interesting because I value what music is bringing to him. And then how can I teach him to value that? Because I know better, but
yeah. I mean, it's in what you're talking about is so interesting to me. Like I sometimes remember thinking to myself, if I just say to one of my kids, I remember I had something recently with one of my kids where there was a decision to be made, And I don't really do this often. And I think that's why it can be effective to say to this child, can I tell you something about yourself that you may not know? Because I'm your mother and I've observed this, that you're happiest when, or that you function better when. So this decision now isn't about me telling you, I want you to do this for no particular reason. It's because I'm observing you. And I've noticed this, that you are your best self when, and that in somehow, because I try not to be dictatorial all the time, that when I actually come out and say something forceful like that, or that I show that I have a conviction, I've been watching you and I've noticed this about you. What do you think about it? Sometimes it actually hits them in the funny bone in a way that it's almost like comfort.
Yeah.
Like I've been seen in a certain way.
I will also say sometimes it works and sometimes, not speaking from personal experience, but it can feel in those moments that no one gets you. And so when someone says that they get you and you feel like they're getting you wrong, that can not work.
Yeah.
It's never been like that for me. I mean, it has been like that for me, not with my mom, but, where other adults of authority have been like, I see you, and then I feel like they see me wrong. But I don't know. I think it does work when my mom does it. Shannon, is this your son who was surprised that he had been learning Twinkle for so long?
No, that was my youngest. And I don't see him ever quitting. It's just, he loves it so, so, so much. And he doesn't have a fun teacher. This teacher really kind of is a little intimidating, but he's a good teacher, and my son just loves playing music. But it's my middle. We just have a different vibe between the kids. I actually find as a teacher, this is really informative.
This has been really informative. I know that we're like kind of talking the periphery, but like I can totally, like this is, all of these cello circle talks are basically my therapy. Like I just, I'm like, I just need to work some stuff out and I want to hear you all talk about it so I can work it out on my own. But really like hearing you, Aviva and Navah, just kind of play off each other. I'm like, that's because that like teacher and parenting, that whole thing, all of it's very similar because we're trying to support the person that's in front of us. We don't want to, I think most of us here agree that we don't want to take some human and turn them into something that they don't want to be. Although I know there are parents and teachers that believe that. I don't think we necessarily do. And so hearing how that plays out, it's really, I feel like what we've talked about, really, quite honestly, I don't really know what we talked about. I feel like I've gotten a lot out of it. Like I couldn't tell you why I've got, I feel like I'm in a better place. So I'm really thankful for both of you for taking the time to come here. It's really nice.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Shannon and you and my mom.
That was lovely.
And Martha, nice to meet you. I'll say yes.
That's great. Well, I'm gonna stop it here and stop the meeting. I'll just stop the recording here.